All the world is a stage, and all the men and women are merely players. Those words from Shakespeare describe an existence consumed by performance. Our guest on this edition of One on One is a performer through and through, both on and off stage. He's gone from working as a successful actor to running shows and making live productions, both artistically and economically successful. After graduating from Derby High School in the 1970s, Dennis Arnold earned a degree in theater from Wichita State. He then found work as a professional actor and singer. Arnold starred in more than 1,700 performances. He also appeared in 2 movies and more than 50 television commercials. Then, after the birth of his second child, Arnold switched gears. He went back to school and worked for many years as an economic development director for Linn and Anderson counties in southeast Kansas. But the theater bug kept biting. 10 years ago, Arnold started his own production company, producing and starring in small musicals and revues. Then in 2018, he accepted the position of president and CEO of the Wichita Grand Opera. As an expert in both live theater and economics, Arnold is working to maintain the opera company's high standards while making changes to ensure its financial viability. Coming up, we'll ask him about the opera's recent move from Century 2 to a different venue, and we'll learn how his return to the challenging and exciting world of live theater has reinvigorated his zest for life. This should be an exciting and insightful half hour as I go one-on-one with the Wichita Grand Opera's Dennis Arnold. Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Victor Hogstrom, and I'm excited to welcome Wichita Grand Opera President and CEO Dennis Arnold to the program. Dennis, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
You have done so many exciting things in your life. I know you're doing something totally different right now, but you've been an actor, you've been in commercials, you've done industrial films, and voiceover work. Mm-hmm. How did that all start?
Well, it started, I started singing when I was in 3rd grade, and it kind of went into more and more of that later in life. I went to Wichita State, and my father was in the Air Force, so we moved around quite a bit. And the last place they were stationed was McConnell. Mm-hmm. And so I stayed here, went to Wichita State. They went back to Texas. I lost my accent over the years. I can do it if you want, but it's really not there.
And what kind of accent was that?
That's my Texas accent.
Texas,
that was
Texas Southern
from
accent.
Waco, Texas. That's where I was. But I lost that over the years, being in acting. And I started out as a vocal music major at Wichita State and switched over to theater and never looked back.
So why theater?
I loved creating something on stage. I really did. And you know, it's such an adrenaline high, I think, when you're doing it. I'd been singing for years, and I'd done stage shows, a lot of that when I was in high school. But I switched over, and I had been known as a singer who occasionally acted. Okay. when I was at that point.
Not an actor who wants to sing.
Not an actor who sings. And so I got mad at myself on that and decided to really work on the acting part, which I did. And I ended up being in the summer company there at Wichita State for 4 years. Only a couple of other people had done that. And then I started branching off into music theater, and then I went and did a number of things. I started at the Crown Uptown doing some things from that. I got married, and then did a little touring from there. We toured around with A Christmas Carol and some other things on a national tour. And at that point, I did a lot of things at the Crown Uptown, did a lot of regional things. I did a number of commercials, about 50 commercials. I did a number of
industrial films.
yes,
and
that's
yes.
it. Yeah,
Voiceover work.
voiceover work.
Acting.
Well, there was a lot of acting within that. I did about 1,700 shows.
Wow.
Total. Yeah.
But in acting for television, you did 2 movies.
2 movies.
One of them was Parade.
Yes, The Parade, a CBS movie.
Right.
And I did Night Screams, which was a horror film. And I played the father of the suspected killer in that. So,
Okay.
so I did that. I was a member of the Screen Actors Guild as well.
So why a love for live performances?
It's getting that feedback from the audience. You get
The applause. And,
yes, it's immediate feedback. It's a different thing when you're doing film. It's a different thing because you can mess up and go back, and you can keep trying it, and you don't have to learn as many lines because they film and then they'll cut to a different. So movies actually were very easy after being in live performances for a while.
Right.
You just scale back everything so it's not as loud, and you don't. And then, so you're allowed to mess up more. But I'll tell you, in theater, you have to be able to cover it if you're doing that, and you're on all the time, and the audience sees whatever it is right there. They're seeing it, and if you make a mistake, you have to be able to cover it.
That's right. And the person following you has to
go along with you. You have to
with you.
depend on that person on stage.
Right. So take us back to the beginning. Were you a theatrical child?
A little bit. I think a lot of children who go into acting actually start out and they're a little introspective. They're a little, and it allows them to step out of themselves. And I think I was that way. That certainly changed over the years. But I think that happens with a lot of people. It allows them to become someone else and do that over that in front of people.
So what kinds of movies or stuff did you watch on television when you were growing up that may have led you to want to become an actor and
Well, I'll tell you,
performer?
the first movie that I saw that actually made me want to perform and sing was, and I remember watching in my grandmother's house, and it was Howard Keel in 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. And you saw this, he was 6'4", weighed about 250. This guy with this booming bass voice, and I loved it. I loved the show. I loved the persona he had, and it kind of I look back on that moment and think, okay. And I was just by myself in the room watching TV.
So what does the opera do for you? You got involved with the opera. You're now head of the Wichita Grand Opera. What does it do for you?
Well, the opera, for me, it marries a couple of my, I guess, strengths over the years. It is an artistic outlet for me, but at the same time, it utilizes the business acumen which I've had to develop over the years. So that's what it brings to me, and it also helps me. Wichita, we moved back to Wichita here, and I was going to do that and do something else, and this came up. And it allows me to do a lot of the things. I've done a couple of operas before as a singer, but it allows me to do that and the business part.
So what does it do for the community?
The opera, if you're a major city, you need to have an opera. The opera is a cultural thing. it predates the musical. It's without opera, we wouldn't have musicals today. That's where America is. In Europe, operas are ubiquitous. I mean, they're all over. They're like music theater is here in America. Opera is, you don't get the same type of thing you do with any other art form. You get with opera because it's a piece that does not use microphones. Opera doesn't. You don't have a body mic on anymore like they do with most music theater productions, right. Or even theatrical anymore. It's all acoustic, and it's a different thing for the human ear to see and hear something that is not modified. When we were at Century 2, we had to hire special voices. That's a 2,200 seat theater, the concert hall. Imagine a voice that has to project over a 45 to 50 piece orchestra into a 2,200 foot hall. That's a very special voice. That's a special talent. It's the Olympics of singing. And I think if people understood that and heard it and actually listened to a lot of it, I think a lot more people would enjoy it and appreciate it.
Now you've moved to a new location.
Yes, we have.
How is that location compared to where you were?
Well, we love it because it's a smaller theater. It seats 470, okay? And the acoustics are better. And what it allows us to do is have more performances with the smaller theater instead of one big, because filling up that hall was hard to do. But we're going to have 3 performances now of our productions. And the stages itself, it has some side stages. As I said, it's acoustically better, and the stage is actually deeper than the ones at Century 2. And the really good thing I like about it is the parking right out front.
Mm-hmm. Now, you, Dennis, began in music, acting, opera, but there's another twist to your life, economics. How did that mix happen?
Well, I was just completing a show at the Crown Uptown, and I was in my mid-30s, and I had 2 young daughters. My second daughter was just a year old at the time, and I'm thinking, everybody around me is starting to get younger, it seems like, with the actors, and I wanted regular health care, and I didn't want all of that burden to be on my wife for that, and I didn't want to move around as much. So I started looking to see what kind of career move. And a friend of mine happened to come to a show that night, well, in that time period, and she was the Convention and Visitors Bureau Director for Newton, Kansas. And she knew of an opening in Council Grove. And so at that point, she brought it up, and I had done some marketing as well. And she put me in touch with them. We talked. I offered to intern for free with her at Newton for 3 months, and they accepted it. And then I ended up being there in Council Grove, starting that tourism department. And we moved there, and that tourism department also was funded by their Industrial Development Authority. And so I ended up doing some work for them as part of that group. That eventually led me into economic development, and I went back and got my degree, my certification from Oklahoma University with the Economic Development Institute. And I did that during the time period and while I was working, and ended up with Lynn and Anderson County south of Kansas City, and was their director of economic development there for those 2 counties, and I was there for 24 years.
And now you're back in the...
And now I'm back. I didn't plan on it. I actually have an economic development management. I have an LLC, which I was going to do consulting, and I had some of that. Wichita State had actually contacted me to possibly teach an economic development class, and I also have a little production company which is called ex-leading man productions. So how I ended up here then with the opera is a friend of mine who was in the opera at the time had done one of my shows. And unbeknownst to me, he put my name forward since I was going to retiring here. One of my oldest daughter lives here. And we were going to be retiring here, and I got a call from Parvan Bakardiev, who was the retiring president and CEO of the opera. And as I said, I was in economic development. Well, he'd heard the development part, which is an opera is a little different.
He thought about fundraising.
That's right. That's what he thought. So he had called me, and we had coffee, and we were talking, and he found out about exactly what I did with my creative background, what I started out in, and then he found out that I had board management experience with the different organizations I'd worked with and nonprofit, and that I had owned my own business, and that I worked with businesses. And by the end of the conversation, he said, "I'd like to put you up for president and CEO of the opera." And I was stunned. I found out later, I guess it's a little unusual to have the creative and the business all rolled into one. Right. With that. So that's how it started. And
so that means Wichita Grand Opera should be in good hands.
I hope so. I'm trying my best.
So now that you're head of the Wichita Grand Opera, what would you describe as your most proud, or what do you describe as what you're most proud of as the president and CEO of that company?
Well, I'm proud that it's still in existence, but also I'm happy about the move and the changes that are happening with that, because we're getting a new energy with that. And I think a lot of people, a lot of my board are excited about that. We're also trying some new things, one of which is we did All Is Calm over Christmas, which was it is a beautiful hybrid piece, which is part concert and part play about World War I and this armistice that happened from the enlisted men in one night. Those are the kind of things that we're going to be, we try and do. We're going to be doing opera. There's no doubt about that. But we're trying to reach out and get in some other people that haven't necessarily been going to opera, to say this is the kind of thing that we think you'll enjoy. So,
what are your long-term goals?
Well, the long-term goals is to keep the opera financially stable, and we're actually going to be going through some strategic planning to do that and to look at that. We want to we're redoing how we do our season. We'll be doing most of our shows out at the Center for the Arts, and I think we're exploring how to utilize that facility better. We're also we're offering it to other groups, other cultural groups, because we're running the theater, and we've actually started partnering with some of the dance companies and some of the private, not just the private schools, but other schools that need a facility. So.
Right. Tell us about the challenges you've faced or that you're facing with the Wichita Grand Opera.
I think there is a challenge in the United States with opera because it's viewed as elitist. Okay? So getting corporate sponsorship is sometimes difficult, and I think we have to combat that. Opera is the most expensive of the performing arts. Because you have a full orchestra with the productions, and the orchestras, even music theater now, rarely has full orchestration. When I say full, we're looking at 45 to 50 piece orchestras. And then generally for the old major operas, you've got 30 people in the chorus, and then you have a number. So there's also dance involved, ballet has been involved with opera. And people think opera, and a lot of opera aficionados, they want to see the big spectacle. And that is a challenge. And I think opera is changing, that we can't lose some of that, but we also need to change what we're doing and doing some more relevant to the times and
You mentioned that people perceive it as elitist.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it?
The accessibility of opera, and it is accessible, but a lot of people from the background, because it was done in these opulent houses in Europe. It's still the Met, when you have the gala at the Met. Mm-hmm. So they see all these people in these beautiful outfits that are thousands of dollars, and so that goes with that gala, all of that, which you have, and you have some of that with it, but that's not all about the opera. Opera started out, I mean, opera's for everyone. It really is. I look at Don Giovanni with Mozart, which we'll be doing in April. So Don Giovanni was actually written, I was reading about the first performances they had of that. It was a party. Everybody who came to see it, a lot of the men had their girlfriends in the show, and they were kind of paying to do that, or their wives, and they had other people, and it was a place to see and be seen, and it was like they had a party and an opera broke out. Mozart was actually composing it and handing out things just as the curtains were open. It was changing and it was going. So that's the background. That's what opera was. It was much more of its day. It was the party source of its day, you know. So
fun time.
It was fun time, and it still is fun, and it can be.
So tell us about the features or the qualities that make a successful opera company.
I think an opera company needs to be relevant. I think they need to be fiscally responsible. And I think, as with anything, I follow this with economic development and even my jobs there, you have to be willing to be able to change and do what's necessary, what the public wants, and bring that out. But it's also education, and educate the public with what it is and bring that art form. For us, Wichita to be a city that's a world-class city, they need a world-class art scene, and part of that has to be opera.
So tell us about one assumption that people make about the Wichita Grand Opera that is wrong.
Boring.
Tell us an assumption that is right.
An assumption about the singing, that it's something they're not going to hear anywhere else. That type of singing.
Okay, let's take a little break and do a little lightning round. You tell me your favorite and why when I say these words to you.
Okay.
All right? Your favorite movie.
I got two. I'm going to give you two.
Okay.
One is the first Indiana Jones movie. I love that. And then for a comedy, because I like comedies more than dramas, Death at a Funeral, the original version, the British version.
Why?
It's funny. It's really, really funny. Okay. And the other one, I like the action films in The Escapist.
TV show.
Oh, the TV show. I actually liked the Hercule Poirot series that PBS had. I remember when it first came out, we never would miss it.
Opera.
Out of the operas, I must say I like Carmen. The music is approachable and it's something that everybody knows.
Your favorite actor?
My favorite actor.
Or actress.
Okay. Well, Katharine Hepburn.
That's a good one. Favorite song?
My favorite song. I'm going to go with Old Man River.
What is your least favorite form of entertainment?
My least favorite form of entertainment. They're going to get me in trouble. Watching volleyball.
Okay.
I had a daughter that played.
Okay, you mentioned your daughter. Tell us about your family and your children.
I have.
Anyone with the acting bug yet?
I'll tell you. So my wife taught theater. That's how we met. And met at a theater conference here in Wichita. And then my daughters, I have 2 daughters. They both have theater degrees against my advice.
Oh.
And they went into that. One also, the oldest, who lives here in Wichita, she teaches at Newton High School. And she has a degree in theater, English, and education. She has 3. And she teaches, as I said, theater at Newton High School. And then my youngest daughter, who's only a year and a half younger than her, she is in LA, and she is trying to break into screenwriting and television writing there. And they're both married, and that's what she's doing. And she's also in the comedy scene and doing that there. And she has degrees in film and theater.
They're following your footsteps.
I tried not to.
So looking at your life in its entirety, if you were to make anyone change or do anything differently, what would that be, Dennis?
I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would, because then I wouldn't be where I am. And I feel blessed to have been able to do all that I've done. And I've got to do a lot of things I really wanted to do. So I can't say that I would change anything, except maybe get skinnier, go on some diets at some parts of my life that I should have.
So life has been great for you.
I wouldn't want to change it, because I'd hate it to be worse.
Right. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much.
Dennis
Thanks for
Arnold,
having me.
President, CEO of Wichita Grand Opera, father and actor, performer, director. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much.
All right. And thank you for watching this week's edition of One-on-One. One-on-one@kpts.org is our email address if you have any questions or comments. Until next time, I'm Victor Hogstrom, and I'll see you again soon for another edition of an interesting conversation with a notable Kansan. Take care.